Dear students, today we are going to discuss financial markets. So, financial market is a market in which people trade financial securities and derivatives at a low transaction cost. So, in a financial market, what we are dealing, people trade financial securities and derivatives at a very low transaction cost. And the securities traded in the financial markets include stocks, bonds, precious metals, etc. Those centers and arrangements which facilitate buying and selling of financial assets, claims and services are called financial market. So, the centers and arrangements which facilitate buying and selling of financial assets, claims and services are called financial markets. And sometimes we find the existence of a specific place or location for a financial market. For example, in the case of a stock exchange, we can find a specific location in Mumbai. Dalal Street Market is the exact place of BSC, Bombay Stock Exchange. Okay, then now we are going to discuss classification of financial market. We can broadly classify financial markets into two. First one is organized market and second one is unorganized market. We can again classify organized market into two. First one capital market, second one money market. And different types of organized markets are money lenders, indigenous bankers, pawnbrokers, traders and landlords. Then now pawnbroker. Who is a pawnbroker? A pawnbroker is an individual or business that offers secured loans to people with items of personal property used as collateral. So pawnbroker may be either an individual or business organization that offers secured loans to people with items of personal property. What is the type of security given here? Personal property is used as collateral security. Then items having been pawned to the broker are themselves called pledges or pawns or simply the collateral. The personal property given as security. Such personal properties are known as pledges or pawns or simply collateral. Pawn shops typically accept jewelry, musical instruments, home audio equipments, computers, video game systems, coins, gold, silver, televisions, cameras, power tools, and other relatively valuable items as collateral. Then now, capital market. The capital market is a market for financial assets which have a long or indefinite maturity period. So, capital market deals with financial assets having a long or indefinite maturity. Generally, it deals with long-term securities which have a maturity period of more than 1 year. Then capital market may be further divided into three. We can classify capital market into three. First one is industrial securities market. Second one is government securities market. And third one is long-term loans market. Let's discuss one by one in detail. First one, industrial securities market. So it is a market for industrial securities. So in this market, industrial concerns raise their capital or debt by issuing appropriate instruments. Industrial concerns raise their capital by issuing appropriate instruments. Then the various instruments here used here are equity shares or ordinary shares, then preference shares, and debentures and bonds. These are the important instruments used in industrial securities market for raising capital. It can be further divided into two: primary market, or it is also known as new issue market, and second one is secondary market or stock exchange or stock markets. Then now primary markets. What is a primary market? Primary market is a market for new issues or new financial claims. And primary market is also known as new issue market. The primary market deals with those securities which are issued to the public for the first time. That means first time we are issuing the securities in the primary market. The corporates issue securities for the first time in the primary market. So primary market helps the capital formation. There are three ways by which a company may raise capital in a primary market. Okay, first one is public issue, second one is right issue, and third one is private placements. What is public issue? Under this method, a company raises capital through sale of securities to the public, and it is called a public issue. What is right issue? When an existing company wants to raise additional capital, securities are first offered to the existing shareholders on a preemptive basis. That is, on the basis of the existing shareholding of the shareholders. Company will offer a certain percentage of new issue to the existing shareholders. So such issue is called right issue. Next one is private placement. Private placement is a method of selling securities privately to a small group of investors. It is not a public issue. A small group of investors will be selected and the company sells the securities privately to that group. And now secondary markets. Securities which you have already issued through the primary markets are traded in secondary markets. Generally, such securities are quoted in the stock exchange. After the issue, the securities will be listed on a stock exchange, and it provides a continuous and regular market for buying and selling of securities. After listing, securities can be continuously bought and sold through the stock exchange. This market, secondary market, consists of all stock exchanges recognized by the Government of India. In India, Bombay Stock Exchange (BSE) is the premier or principal stock exchange in India. Then government securities. It is a market where government securities are traded. And the government securities market is also known as gilt-edged securities. In India, there are different kinds of government securities, short-term as well as long-term. Long-term government securities are traded in this market, while short-term securities are traded in the money market. As we already discussed that long-term securities are traded in the capital market. At the same time, short-term securities are traded in the money market. Securities issued by central government, state governments, semi-government authorities like city corporations, port trust, etc., state electricity boards, all India and state level financial institutions and public sector enterprises are dealt in this market. Okay. And one of the important features of a government securities market is that government securities are issued in denominations of 100 and interest is payable half yearly and they carry tax exemptions also. And the role of brokers in marketing these securities is particularly very limited. There is no role of brokers in government securities markets. The major participants in government securities market are commercial banks because they hold a very substantial portion of these securities to satisfy their SLR requirement, statutory liquidity reserve requirements. So, in order to meet the SLR requirements, the commercial banks hold a major portion of the securities of government securities to maintain the SLR requirements of the banking organizations. The secondary market for these securities is very narrow. What is the reason? Because most of the institutional investors retain these securities until the maturity. We already discussed that the major participants in government securities market is commercial banks. So they purchase these securities and hold these securities until the maturity of the security. The government securities are in many forms. First one is stock certificates or inscribed stock. Second one is promissory notes. Third one is bearer bonds which can be discounted. Government securities are sold through the Public Debt Office of Reserve Bank of India. Government securities are sold through the Public Debt Office of Reserve Bank of India. While treasury bills, that means short-term securities. Treasury bills are short-term securities and treasury bills are sold through the auctions. Long-term loans market. Development banks and commercial banks play a significant role in long-term loans market by supplying long-term loans to corporate customers. Long-term loans market may further classified into term loans market, mortgages market, financial guarantees market. These are the three types of long-term loans market. First one is term loans market. In India, many industrial financing institutions have been created by the government, both at the national and regional levels, to supply long term and medium term loans to corporate customers directly as well as indirectly. These development banks dominate the industrial finance in India. Which are the important industrial development banks? Institutions like IDBI, IFCI, ICICI, and other state financial corporations come under development banks. These institutions meet the growing and varied long term financial requirements of industries by supplying long term loans. These development banks supply necessary finance to meet the growing and varied long term financial requirements of industries. Mortgage market. The mortgage market refers to those senders which supply mortgage loan mainly to individual customers. A mortgage loan is a loan against the security of immovable property like real estate, like land, building, etc. The transfer of interest in a specific immobile property to a secured loan is called a mortgage. So what is a mortgage? The transfer of interest, the transfer of ownership in a specific immobile property to secure a loan is called a mortgage. And the mortgage may be equitable mortgage or legal mortgage. What is an equitable mortgage? Equitable mortgage is created by a mere deposit of title deeds to properties as security. We are just depositing the title deeds of the property as security. But in the case of legal mortgage, the title in the property is legally transferred to the lender by the borrower. The ownership of the property is transferred to the lender through registration by the borrower in the case of legal mortgage. So when we compare the equitable mortgage and legal mortgage, which one is less risky? Legal mortgage is less risky. And we can again classify the mortgage into two, first charge and second charge. In the first charge mortgage, the mortgager transfers his interest in the specific property to the mortgagee as security. Mortgager transfers his interest in the specific property to the mortgagee as security. Then what is second charge? When the property is already mortgaged once to another creditor, it becomes a second charge when it is subsequently mortgaged to somebody else. The mortgage can also further transfer his interest in the mortgaged property to another. In such a case, it is called a submortgage. The mortgagee can also transfer his interest in the mortgage property to another bank or person. And in such case, it is called a submortgage. Financial guarantees markets. A guarantee market is a market where finance is provided against the guarantee of a reputed person. Finance is given against the security or guarantee of a reputed person. Guarantee is a contract to discharge the liability of a third party in case of his default. So, the person who has given the guarantee has to discharge the liability of the third party only in case of default in payments. Guarantee acts as a security from the creditor's point of view. In case the borrower fails to repay the loan, what will happen? The liability falls on the shoulders of the guarantor, who is liable to pay the loan. The guarantor is liable to pay the loan in case the borrower fails to repay the loan. The common forms of financial guarantee are performance guarantee and financial guarantee. What is a performance guarantee? Performance guarantees cover the payment of retention money, advance payment, non-completion of contracts, etc. Then on the other hand, financial guarantees cover only financial contracts. In India, the market for financial guarantees is well organized. The financial guarantees in India relate to deferred payment for imports and exports. So, for external trade, some banks will guarantee the payment of the bills of the imported goods. Medium and long-term loans raised abroad. Medium and long-term loans raised by companies from abroad. Loans advanced by banks and other financial institutions. Loans advanced by banks and other financial institutions within India. These guarantees are provided mainly by commercial banks, development banks, governments, both the central and states, and other specialized guarantee institutions like ECGC, Export Credit Guarantee Corporation, and DICGC, Deposit Insurance Credit Guarantee Corporation. This guarantee financial service is available to both individual and corporate customers. This financial guarantee is available to both individual customers and corporate customers. Okay, thank you.